How are we doing today, Mike?
Feeling great, Frank. Welcome back to Perspective Shift.
Thanks for having me.
Love to be here.
Yeah.
So how are we doing this week?
Doing really well, man.
Awesome. What are we diving into? What's our topic? And how would we like to kick this week off?
The topic is synchronicity. And so Mike and I, we've been doing this...
Focusing on breath work.
Yeah, series. I think it's like 5. We already did 5 of them. Mm-hmm. Not in a row. We actually had...
a guest in between.
But so since we've been doing this, Mike and I have been practicing this meditation and breathing for I've been doing it for quite a few years. So has Mike. But then we said to ourselves when we started this, we're going to do this diligently for a period of time. So we've been doing this over like 6 weeks, 7 weeks straight. And
with breath being a main focus.
Yeah, breath and in turning into meditation, how we want to look at it. So yeah, breath being the main focus and then going into like a meditative state afterwards, even when we're, conducting ourselves at work and working with clients and everything else. So we started doing that. And what we started noticing is, we've always noticed synchronicity. We've been talking about this for 4 years, but we actually noticed a steady volume of synchronicity. All right.
Regular occurrence.
Regular occurrence, but happening like one after another and after another that are moving in what we consider to be a preferential
direction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For what Mike's doing and for what I'm doing, a myriad of things, everything from relationships to health to business. And we noticed these opportunities, feeling better, all these things actually started happening because Mike and I created a vow between us to do this for as long as we're going to tell people to do it. We're going to do it. And like I said, we've always done it, but not with this devotion or dedication. And all of a sudden, wow. So why don't you kick this off about the synchronicity with the gentleman that we're going to feature a little bit today. The show isn't about him, but we like to feature this guy because of the synchronicity.
Absolutely. I think that was a great introduction to what we wanted to kind of chat about today. So like Frank and I were talking about, it's been a main focus of ours, these last 6 to 8 weeks to really go back and start from the basics, which, if we go back to the 7 needs that we discussed, what's need number 1? That's oxygen. All right, let's focus on the foundation, the breath. So that's what we've been doing these last 8 weeks. And we started to notice different things, pop up and happen, different messages we're even receiving from those who are listening. Lots of cool synchronistic type of situations. But here's one in particular that, Frank and I wanted to share on this week's episode. So it was the last couple weeks of August, and I don't know about those listening, but August was a turbulent month, if you will. There was a lot of high energy, is kind of how I like to call it, in the month of August. Something I was really picking up on, like, oh wow, this is intense at times. I was noticing that. Well, it was one day, I can't recall what day, but it was after work one day, or it was during work actually. I happened to be on my phone and I was on the Instagram application, and I remember I started like going through my Instagram feed, just kind of looking at, swiping through, seeing what's going on, and all of a sudden pops up a post from this gentleman named Randy Vettenheimer. Randy Vettenheimer is an energy doctor. One of his actual online, handle is Energy Doctor with a K. And this guy never posts anything. He just doesn't. It's very, intermittent. Like it's just very
he's not
random.
A social media whore.
Yeah, exactly. He's not this dude who's in your face every day, 4 videos, explain. Like social media is not his platform. And so it's just really funny because I've been a fan and followed Randy's work, for several years now, at least 4 or 5 years. And I've watched his show on Gaia and all this, and it was just very funny because I felt very pulled to him when this Instagram message popped up, or this, it was just a random photo he posted, nothing special, nothing unique, but he never posts. And I watched myself almost as if I was observing myself, but I watched myself click onto like his main page, look at his stuff, and then go from his page to his website. And I was watching myself allow this situation happen. So I go to his website, I'm reading a little bit about it, just looking on his stuff, and then I go to his contacts page, and then there's an email and a phone number. And I'm like, I'm going to call Randy Vettenheimer's team and I'm going to see if I can schedule a one-on-one session. I'm just allowing things to naturally occur. You know, I'm not trying to force anything. Just as things come up, I'm watching this all play out. And so I call this number. I leave this voicemail on a voicemail recording. Hey, you know, this is Mike. I'm a big fan of, you know, Randy's work. You know, I kind of start talking about, you know, where I found Randy through Gaia, you know, his show Quantum Effect. Love his, you know, love his practice, his gift to, you know, the metaphysical community, all this. And then the following, you know, and I just left it be, and I went back to work, etc. And I didn't tell anybody, you know. It was more just like, oh, you know, let's see what this comes of this, you know, right? So then the next day pops up, and you know, I'm at work and I'm doing my thing and running around, and all of a sudden I get this call from a, you know, a random number, a 202 number, and I answered, hey, this is Mike, you know, like I would answer any call. And, hey, Mike, it's Randy Vettenheimer. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, Randy. I'm like, what an honor. You know, this is a pleasure to speak with you directly. You know, I'm a huge fan of your work. And, you know, so we start chit-chatting and all this stuff. And I said, you know, I'm not coming for you for anything in particular. In fact, it's kind of weird. I felt like I was drawn to you this week. You popped up right there on my Instagram feed. It was almost like I was observing myself reaching out to contact you. I just feel like there's something that you know, can share that can help me on my path. You know, I've been on this path for years now. I'm always trying to grow. I would love to do a one-on-one session with you. And he said, absolutely. You know, let's get something on the books. What's your schedule look like? You know, we came up with a date, and we set a date for a week later or so. And so after I speak with him, all excited, you know, and I start telling Frank, I start telling my girlfriend Kayla, you know, and I'm like, hey, this is awesome, you know, this is who I'm speaking with. And of course, Frank remembers him from the Quantum Effect, and I'm actually surprised we've never featured him on this show. And so we set this date, right? And so the date comes. This was last Tuesday for me. And I get on the call with, and I do want to point out, like, I had no expectation going into this. And Frank, you talk about this all the time. Yeah. You know, the more you set something up or you build something up in your head, you're like, oh, that didn't play out the way I pictured it or the way I imagined it, you know? So I try not to go into situations now, like building things up in my head, or this is what he's going to explain to me, or this is what he's got to share with me. Just let's see how this plays out, you know? So I get on a call with this gentleman, and we start talking about, his television show, you know, the Quantum Effect. You know, he starts talking about David Hawkins, who we've covered on this show, and his consciousness scale level, you know, and he kind of explains, like, David Hawkins was one of the first people I saw who brought, you know, ideas from martial arts, consciousness, you know, different avenues, and was able to develop a scale that really captured, you know, this experience that we call consciousness, or the path, or journey, you know, etc. And so he was talking a lot about him. And then he's like, you know, I've had this gift since I was a kid. You know, I've got a Native American background. He starts, you know, kind of explaining stuff. But anyways, he has the ability to essentially kind of see where you're at, energetically speaking, voltage speaking, specifics, you know, health-wise. He works with a lot of cancer patients. He works with a lot of, you know, people facing, you know, serious issues, you know, addiction, things like that. He works with a lot of government, you know, officials. So that's something he also does. And he was explaining he also works with a lot of different real estate people, you know, in regards to large real estate transactions, buying and selling hotels and, you know, commercial property, all this, you know, cool stuff, even actors, actresses, etc. And so I found that fascinating, you know, and he was explaining the size of our energy field absolutely affects, you know, this experience that we call reality. And he's like, my job is, you know, I'm going to help you learn or remember to be yourself, and I'm here to increase your overall energy field. And I'm like, this is fascinating, like, this is so cool. And he actually gauged and told me and measured where my energy field was at before this call, where my voltage was at, you know, my etheric field, all of the above. And it was very cool, you know. I'm taking notes and listening to him and whatnot. And he's like, don't worry about any of this, because at the end, you know, or throughout this, I'll be working on you energetically. And from that state, you know, by the time we're done with this call, we're going to have a huge increase in all of your outputs, you know, and you'll actually feel this. So we start going through the call, and he's asking me different questions about myself. He's having me, state my name, state my mother's name, my father's name, asking me different questions and kind of working through my energy. And it was very cool because he's like, all right, something's coming up here. It's age 14. It's something going on with mom. And, we need to clear that, and he's like, there's like this immense amount of stress here that I'm picking up. Also, age 15, it's like a spike in energy. And he's like, well, yep, let's get in there and clear that out. And it was weird. As I'm on the call, I remember intuitively knowing as we're going through this that it didn't matter what he was picking up on, because what he was picking up on was some old story, some old memory, something that, an unconscious, energy block within the body. And so it was cool. I wasn't like, oh, what happened when I was 14 with my mom? I need to know this story, like how did this play out? No, it wasn't like that. And I intuitively knew that. I don't know if I was picking up off of his energy or I've just done enough of this type of work in the past, but that's something, I picked up on. And it was very cool because he shared with me things that he could have never known. Like Randy Vettenheimer doesn't know me, my history, grew up with me, nothing like that. And he made like very intuitive comments to me that, were eye-opening. It was very cool. Like at one point I remember him saying to me, so when you were younger, you used to have like these really bad night terrors. Do you remember this? And I was like, this is crazy because I did. Like this is a thing like my parents know, I remember that like growing up, they would always talk about, my mom would come in and I'd be having these horrible night terrors and, she would have to shake me violently to wake me up, but I never remembered them. It was like a dream that I never remembered. Like, so it's just weird that he like knew that, and as we're talking, he's like, okay, so I'm getting your brother, and I didn't tell him I had a brother, and so he's just touching on things that I was just kind of like, wow, this is very cool. I can see him picking up on things. And so we worked through this, and the phone call, great experience. He's helping increase my overall energy field, my etheric field, voltage, all the above. And we get to like the end of this call and I just feel great. And I remember as he's working on me throughout this call, I even told him this, I can feel like the energy in my hands and in my feet pulsating. I can feel the energy in my body. At one point, I actually felt my chest begin to sweat. And like I'm in an air-conditioned room, when I'm taking this call, I'm sitting there nice and relaxed. So there's no reason to, be perspirating or anything like that. And so I was like, wow, like this is fascinating. I can physically feel him working on me. And one thing also that I did, and I didn't mention this to you, Frank, I told Kayla about this, but as he was working on me, I remember sending out an intention myself into the field, if you will, where I was like, I'm connecting with Randy, I'm opening myself to Randy, and I'm essentially authorizing, this energy work. And that was kind of me setting my intention that, hey, I'm participating. I want this. I want to receive this. I want to be involved with this. And I think that also played a role too,
Yeah, it does.
Because like your intention matters, if you're closed off, etc., it's harder for somebody to get in there and do their thing. So I remember intuitively doing that because I wanted to, set that intention and stuff. So we get through it, at the end of it, feeling great, like truly great. Had a lot of good energy, very, very excited, right? And so we wrap up that phone call, and I call my girlfriend Kayla, and I'm like, you won't believe this phone call that I just had with Randy Vettenheimer. It was amazing. We're chatting, I'm telling her all about it, all this stuff. She's like, Mike, this is fascinating. Like, I just sent him an email. And this is like 8 o'clock at night, 8:30. And, my girlfriend, she's got 2 kids. She works long hours. She's tired. I mean, for her to send an email after 8 p.m., like it was odd, like it was just like, oh, like this, normally would have waited till tomorrow or something like that. But she's like, I had something come over me. I wanted to email him. I want to get on the schedule with him. And so Randy actually reached out to her the following day. Hey, let's set something up. So they jump on a quick phone call. They get a slot schedule for her. Happens to be 3 days later on Friday. This is this past Friday. And she was like, yep, I'll take the slot. Let's do it. And so then that's Friday, right? Well, I see Frank in between here on Thursday, I believe it was. I actually went into his salon. I went to go get a haircut. And I'm chatting with Frank telling him about, like, dude, I just had this great experience with Randy Bettenheimer. You won't believe it. And I'm kind of sharing some different things. And so Frank, is like, dude, you got to give me this dude's number. Let me call him. And so I give Frank the guy's number. And as soon as Frank, wraps up that day, he actually was on his way out to meet with somebody for a different appointment. He calls Randy on his way to his appointment. But you should actually jump in and share this part. Because it's funny, because Randy freaking answered when you called.
Yeah, because it was funny, because I was, I'm driving in my car, and I'm just, assuming greatly that I was going to leave a message, and like it
was like 4:30, 5 o'clock.
He's like, "Hello, this is Randy." I'm like, "Oh," and it was kind of like a little shocking. I'm like, "Hey, Randy, how you doing?" And we started talking for a couple of minutes, and then I set up the appointment for 2 days later in the evening.
Yep.
And again, my experience is very similar to Mike's. But it is a synchronicity, and that's kind of what we want to talk about today. It's because of the breath work we've been doing, because all the breath work we do actually amplifies your electromagnetic field, your torus field, your energy bubble, whatever it is you want to label it. And what I've noticed is the further it goes out, the more of the situation, circumstance that are available to me in the direction in which I want to go, such as, okay, I'm expanding my business. All of a sudden, I saw opportunities come about where before is, I know I want to expand my business. Who the hell does not? But I didn't see the opportunities, and the only thing I could do is go back into my memory of how things were, and it's based on where I want to go. It's quite dismal if you do that, even though my past was great, but you can't see anything beyond that. So as the breath work we've been doing, it's expanding, and then all of a sudden, both obviously Mike, Kayla, and I, within a period of time, were on the phone with Randy having this session, and then all three of us are going to go see Bashar on Saturday.
This weekend, we're going to be with Mr. Daryl Anka.
Yeah, so the purpose of this, discussion today is about synchronicity and doing the work. Because even Randy, it was very interesting. I found out from Mike that I asked him what exercises. So what he does, he literally goes in there, and I could feel it. He goes in, like Mike mentioned. For me, I had certain blockers. He told me I had a major concussion at 13. And now I played various sports, but I remember this one time. I can't remember if I was 13 or not, but I think it was. You know those dumpsters?
Yeah, like it's a metal dumpster?
Yeah, the big ones. This is a really big one. It was behind this truck depot, kind of outside my neighborhood. And me and my friends are riding a bike, and at the end, they have the poles with the round clips on it so the truck can pick it up. I was talking to my friend. I'm embarrassed to say this, and I wasn't paying attention. And all of a sudden I'm driving, my friend goes, "Look out." And I look forward, and I hit this thing. I was probably doing like 12, 13 miles an hour on a bike. I was moving pretty good. I hit this thing. It hit me right in the forehead, and I fell off my bike. And my bike like ghost rided for like 20 feet. And I'm laying on the ground. And for like 2 days, I had an indent in my forehead.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Just go home. I got this white, and then it finally swelled up and whatever. So it could have been that. It could have been, boxing. It could have been numerous things. But it was it was a pretty good hit to the head. And he actually even told the part where it was in the frontal lobe. Yeah. And so what he did is he went and cleared it out because it was blocking energy coming in through, which can, in certain cases, can create mild bouts or great bouts of what we call depression because the energy is not flowing. And even when I went to see Rosie, our massage therapist, she's a gift as well. What she noticed is like my energy, I have energy always coming in and I have a difficult time letting it go. But that's what she does, releases it. So it was kind of coordinated synchronicity of all these things actually happening. And as we start to expand, all of a sudden you notice these things flow. So he has the capacity to go in there like a computer program and if I only run one window on my computer, it works really efficient. But they're like, but you should be able to run multiples and still have the same efficiency. So what I think I've been doing a lot of my life is only running one window. That explains why I can't take the garbage out and do a text message at the same time. My wife's like, what's wrong?
I'm
running one program at a time, honey. Just leave me alone. And I'm not going to tell her this because now she's going to expect me to run multiple programs.
Exactly,
and I'm like,
right?
I'm still not going that route because I got to.
So if she doesn't listen to this episode.
Good luck with that one.
Yep.
But anyway, so that's I kind of noticed that, but I've been lucky my whole life. Things have seemingly worked out, but they seem to work out in a very intermittent way. But ever since Mike and I took this devotion into this breathing, it's not, it actually is happening in this upscale movement. Things keep falling into place where I'm like, oh my God, like kind of like you want to wake up and pinch yourself, but we realize we're doing the work. And then coming into Randy is just another facet within the whole experience that Mike and I have, and obviously Kayla and other people that are using this type of work, that it keeps opening up these doors to kind of clear it out. Because again, like Mike, I, and Kayla, we like we don't have any major diseases. Although we want to like explore. Like I know I have more energy, or know I can expand more, but I don't know what's like. How do I get there?
Correct.
Where when I got off the phone, like the first I got off the phone, I asked him how was he doing, talking about Randy, and he goes, "Oh, it's like yeah." He's like, "I had a heck of a day," and it's like pretty much all of his clients that day within that week were dealing with like life terminal issues, cancer, certain type of heart disease and stuff like that. And I'm like, and he's like, so he's like,
what are you here for?
So what are you here for? I'm like, like I don't know,
spiritual well-being.
I want to expand my field to about 100 feet. How about that? You know, he's like, okay, let's work on it.
I was gonna say to him.
So so it was interesting, but he doesn't care. He just asked why you're here, just to get a significance. But he wasn't like, oh, I don't work with people unless you have a disease. He's like, no, because I'm trying to prevent anything from happening. But I really, because the more I expand and I have experiences throughout life, and it was somewhat intermittently, I noticed new opportunities. Certain concepts that I may have not understood before, I understand now. It's kind of like the understanding of the further I go up the mountain, the more of the valley I can see. So why wouldn't I keep walking? But now, ever since we started devoting ourselves like 6-7 weeks, or probably about 7 weeks ago, doing this, all these things come to play. And for me, I just literally, it was last night. We had the conversation with Randy, like 6 o'clock Arizona time, and wow! And one of the protocols he gave me, which is interesting, was something I have to do for 40 days. Again, another devotion thing, which falls into the aspect of synchronicity. Why? Because to me, it's not a big deal to do that now, because I'm like dedicated to doing all this stuff. So what I noticed though is the exercises that he gave me were different than yours.
Correct. And but different from Kayla's.
But very similar to Kayla's. Mine was.
Yeah, yours was far more similar to Kayla's than mine was.
Yeah, I haven't personally spoke to Kayla, but Mike told me. And very similar. And so I imagine is depending on where you are, what exercise you need based on what energy blocks are in you. So, but yeah, it was fascinating because he pulled out certain times in my life where
you just couldn't know,
not knowing my history, and I'm old enough to where my history is not online, like because like
you couldn't look this up.
In the 70s and the 80s there wasn't any social media for me to put out there, and I'm not like a big social media guy. I know my partner at work's like, you need to be. I'm like, you be that.
Try.
But I get it. But nonetheless, he couldn't like look me up and see anything about my life. Really, there's nothing out there other than my podcast and what have you. And then he would have to go listen to every single podcast to hear my story
to piece them together,
and not even know if I'm bullshitting or not. Too,
No.
That was the one thing he. So he actually has a capacity to know if you're speaking the truth.
Correct.
So one of the facets. So like Mike mentioned, he actually has you say your name. And the way you're saying it, it's somewhat. I'm going to ask him about the depth of it, but I believe it's into tonality how you say it, and he could pick up on the resonance to tell you if you're speaking the truth. From that, he's measuring your field. So by the end, my field has grown substantially because he removed some stuff. But he asked me to say, I love myself. He goes, okay, that's the energy's pretty good there. And then he said, I am worthy. He's like, oh man, we're at a deficit here, and it was the way I said it, right? And it was like. So he's like, okay, hold on a second. And we go through stuff. He doesn't have me do anything. Like he doesn't tell me to breathe and nothing like that. I hear him talking, and he's talking to himself basically, not for me to answer the question. Okay, something happened at 10, move to here, 15, 13, 15, 20. And he was like stuck on those. Then 37. And, I'm thinking in my head, okay, I kind of roughly know what was happening about that point, but I also knew enough not to it's not about that. It's about the removal of the field. There's energy in the field that's stuck, that's allowing. It's kind of like if you had a broken pipe or a clogged up pipe, say. Water's getting through, but not to the degree in which it ought to be, and we know it ought to be getting through. But yeah, it's still. I'm not dying of thirst, but nonetheless, it's choking out the water. And what happens when you choke out the water? You can do less activity. But if I want to do more activity, do more in the world, I need this field to be seamless, right? Yeah, I'm like, okay, I can only work out for half hour if I have, a liter of water. But if I had a gallon of water, I could work out all day. That's kind of the analogy I use with that. And so after we hung up, before we hung up, he did all the work. And then I started asking personal questions about himself. But I literally felt like this brand new person. Then he asked me, he's okay, say this phrase, I am worthy. And I said, I'm worthy. He goes, wow, that was a huge jump. Mm-hmm. So he can pick up on truth. And based on how we talk, and we all can. Like, has anyone ever said to you, I love you? And you're like, what's wrong? Mm-hmm. Right? They said the word I love you, and everyone knows the association of love. Love means the deepest emotion 100%. You give to another person. But then you look at somebody else that just smiles at you and looks at you, doesn't utter a word, and you know they love you. Mm-hmm. Right? And so that's what he picks up on. We can't lie to ourselves. And with him, you can't lie to him either. It doesn't serve a purpose to do so. And he doesn't care if you're lying to him or not. He's just going to go and change that energy, amplify it to where when you actually say, I'm worthy, I love myself, you actually start to believe it energetically. Because here's another synchronistic thing. Before I got on the phone with him last night, I was listening to Michael Singer talk about this. And he might have talked about this before. And I listened to a lot of Michael Singer. And I've never heard it this way. He goes, your mind does not know what love is. The essence of your heart and the vibration of your body does. I'm like, that's interesting. Your mind knows how to say the word love, but doesn't feel love. My body feels love. So what have me and Mike been talking about for the last 7 weeks or greater, or whatever, I don't know how many podcasts we did on this. It's when you have a thought and it creates anxiety, say, go back to the body and stop breathing and augment the breathing. So you change your heart rate by breathing. If you breathe out slowly, your heart rate slows down. If you need to speed up for energy, you do the opposite. And there's a myriad of different breath techniques that you can do to actually control your heart rate, which then controls your energy field, right? Because our heart emits out 500,000 times, 5,000 times more electromagnetic field than the brain does. Wow. I heard that. So where is the greatest place to go? Is into the body, right? So all of a sudden, hearing Michael Singer talking about the mind doesn't know anything. So yes, intellectually, I can spew out everything, and people are like, oh, that sounds amazing, but does my body feel it? Mm-hmm. And Randy caught me on that today. But then he opened it up, and all of a sudden today I wake up and I do the exercise he told me to do, and I have to do it for 40 days. If I miss one day, you have to start over. Mm-hmm. He told me this funny story, like when he was in his 20s, I forgot what age, some of his 20s, like he started doing this himself, where he was doing 40 days. And one of the things was sleep. So what you do is you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to bed at 9:30 and then I'm waking up at 5, say, and you stick to it. You don't change it. You stick to it. You have to do it 40 days. So if you miss a day, you have to start over. So he's like in day 2 or day 3, and a buddy of his calls up, say, hey, and you got to understand, this is probably for him, maybe back in the 80s.
He's 75 years old.
He's 75. So in his 20s, he would have been like, what, in the 80s, 70s, around there. So like maybe 70s.
Yeah.
I'm not doing the math right. But anyway, Frank calls up, it's like, hey, got tickets to the Rolling Stones tonight. And he's like, I can't do it. And I started laughing. I'm thinking to myself, I would have started over to see the Rolling Stones.
Me too.
Even if I was on day 20, I would have started over. But he's a different man.
Day 35.
Yeah, day 35. Yeah. I was like, Stones, I'm going to see them. Especially they were somewhat, I don't want to say that. I guess they were definitely closer to what we call their prime.
Oh, totally.
They're still touring now, and they're older than he is, But anyway, I thought that was funny.
That is funny.
But there is something about, so Mike and I created this devotion to ourselves and to each other, and we started doing this, and it works. Because if I go to the gym, intermittently work out, in the period of time I had worked out like 6 days in a row for a month. Like, it was great. And then I fell off, and all of a sudden it starts to diminish the feeling, whatever. Yeah. So there's something about this continuous thing. And I think the whole thing about the 40 days is what happens is after 40 days, it's your lifestyle. Yeah. So you no longer have to think about the 40 days. Mm-hmm. And that's really the premise of these. There's a thing out there for people. It's called 75 Hard, I believe it's called.
I've heard of that.
I remember doing that. I couldn't do the 75 days Well, I should say could. I didn't do the 75 days. I did it. I got to about day 60. And why my excuse was, and people are going to laugh at me, but it's a poor excuse. I was going to Europe for 2 weeks. And there was certain things like, oh shit, I'm not going to be able to do that, So, but I'm like, okay, but I knew this beforehand. And it's like, I'm just going to go as far as I can. It was up to 60 days. And I had to start a couple of times over, but there is something that changed. So actually when I was in Europe, I carried it out, but I wasn't as strict, and I let it go because the time difference and everything else. Couldn't get to sleep at the same exact time. Reading a book, I didn't really have time to read a book. I read a little bit, but especially going to the gym, didn't have time to do that, but I was walking around. So in my mind, I kind of went to 75 days, but not as strict. But what happens is even today, and this was like a couple of years ago I did this, those things are still part of my life. Because once you put in there, and that's the synchronistic thing. So when you start to do that and you actually put the work in, because a lot of times people will do something like, I did the breath work for 2 days, and I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, okay, when you were doing, when I was doing it, I felt good. I'm like, why did you stop? And then over time, because the 1 minute breath work we were talking about, where you breathe in, and you could count. I think we put up the Sandy breath work, breath work by Sandy last week, and you breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4 out, and that's a steady in and out your nose. And if you keep doing that, your breathing at night is going to replicate that to a closer degree than it was before that. In that pattern, you're going to know you're going to wake up, and if you actually have an oxygen machine tester, I don't, but they're very cheap. I just know if I wake up tired, I know I didn't have that much oxygen. But to me, it's no big deal. I go right out to the couch and do like deep breathing, and I oxygenate my body. But when I wake up like feeling really good, like I have been the last couple of days, except for yesterday, I got like 4 hours of sleep due to something else, but all of a sudden I realized, okay, I'm actually doing more nose breathing than mouth breathing at night. So my goal is never to be on one of those machines.
The
CPAP machine.
CPAP,
But that's not really my goal. I don't even think about that.
Totally.
But I've noticed these things, and because I'm doing the work, even in the subconscious and also unconscious, my breath work, my body's working better. So in the conscious state, I start to I feel my energy going lower. I start to breathe in deeper and whatever, and I raise it up. So when I raise it up, it's not just about feeling good, which is the prime reason to do that, but life starts to work out better. Like now my business is blowing up. I have like a situation where like, do we need to expand the building we're in type of idea? And I'm like, that's a great thing to have. But it's not overwhelming us. When I say us, the salon, it's actually everything's flowing, and I'm learning to just let it happen. And all these things permeated in a greater field of coming up when we started the 7 week. My life was working out beautifully before that. But when I started dedicating that time, and now I actually look forward to doing the breath work, and I do it all day long.
Me too.
Yeah,
I set alarms on my phone. Well, I do it in the morning, of course, just because that's how I start my day. But I have an alarm set at 12.
Yeah.
To consciously do it. Then I do it again after I eat, and then I do it before bed.
Yeah, because now I'm the annoying person at work, because I was like, I'm feeling tired. I'm like, okay, do me a favor, let's do breath work together.
Yep.
And we do it, and all of a sudden, like, how do you feel? I feel good. And now I'm getting like me and Mike were talking, and right before meditation, and we're talking about breath work and stuff like that. And a client of mine texted me, say, hey, can you send me that breath work you were talking about the other day that we were doing at the salon? And I'm like, another synchronistic thing where
exactly.
Yeah. So obviously it's working, because I don't know, like there's certain things that work for me but don't work for others, and I completely get that. But I still haven't found. There might be somebody out there. I still haven't found a person yet that was willing to do it, that it didn't work to a degree.
Oh, absolutely.
At all. I haven't. They may be out there, but I haven't met someone that actually did the work, the breath work, and haven't elevated their feeling. And when you feel better, your actually field grows. All right.
And Randy talks about that heavily.
Yeah. And so Randy's a specialist where he can go in and mend the pipes, if you will, or the wires. And if you have a wire that's kind of
see the clog in the pipe.
Yeah, if you have a wire that's kind of broken, electricity will still go through it, but not at the degree in which it should for the unit of whatever instrument you need to, or machine you need to energize to get it going. And that's kind of us. We're a machine, but we also have the capacity within it, as we expand the field, to heal itself.
Yeah.
So we don't need to throw little men in there. Those little men are already, and women, by the way.
Exactly.
They're in there working to fix everything. But if we don't have the field of energy, like, in other words, now the workers are working in the dark, and it's very difficult. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of elevating your energy field just by simple breath work, and then watch what happens in your day-to-day life with synchronicity. And so then why would you stop doing it? Mm-hmm. This is something Mike and I, and hopefully everyone out there listening, is going to do to the time they take their last breath.
Correct.
Not just do it to get out of a ditch, because then you're going to fall in another ditch if you don't. Just keep doing this, and see what happens.
I saw this comment, it was actually yesterday, on one of the breathwork videos when I was doing some breathing before I went to bed last night. And somebody, it was like just a fan of, I think it was, pretty sure it was Breathe with Sandy. Yeah, it was. There was a comment on there, and it was like, hey, I want to let you know, I've been doing this now for 3 weeks, twice a day. And I noticed that my natural state of breathing is starting to mimic this slow conscious breath, these deep breaths, less, stress moments throughout the day, and that he was naturally feeling, the breath work. And that ties into everything Frank and I are talking about. Talks about why Randy recommended the 40 days. Again, it's now the new software, is probably the easiest way to say it. So you take this bad habit that we have, where we're caught in our head, we're not breathing, we're not in the moment, we're worried about stuff, we're getting, our heart rate up, and we're actually in a state of fight or flight when we're breathing 15 times or 15 breaths per minute. We're actually in that fight or flight state, and it's taking you into a more natural resting state, which is our most natural state. And so to be able to program the body and add that good habit, it's crazy to see the synchronicity and effects when you are implementing a core great habit of slow, deep breathing, calm breathing. You get less worked up, you start to see things flow more or more natural, which I thought was great. One other synchronicity that I want to throw out there that's just like on a more personal note, when he was going through my energy field, he got to this one point, and I could tell you, it was about my dad. And he said to me something like, all right, so real quick, because the entire time he's having, speak names, he's picking up on different things. But he got to a stage like Frank was talking about where, how he said, hey, I want you to tell you I love yourself. Well, he got to this one point where he's like, I'm going to speak as your father.
Yeah, he did that to me too. Yeah.
And I want you to respond, with thank you. And so he said to me as his father, I am proud of you, and, what would you say to that, And I said, thank you. And he's like, all right. And so whatever I say, I want you to, respond with thank you. And so he did a couple other, types of things, like in the voice of my father, I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm there for you. Different things, and it was weird. It was like I could feel this energy popping, in my heart. It was like a main point of this experience, because he didn't do that with everyone. This was specifically something tied to that, which I found very interesting, just as a subconscious, stuck energy. And it was funny, yesterday or on Saturday, I'm out to dinner. It was for my brother's birthday, and, Kayla and I are there. It's my parents, my brother, sister and family and whatnot. And my dad goes, hey, we're all sitting there at the table at the restaurant, and he's like, I was watching your guys' podcast with Frank these last couple weeks regarding breathing. And just for those listening, my dad does not listen to podcasts. My dad's never been, one to know these types of topics or anything like that. He's at home watching Fox News, talking about, the president, whatever. So it's just very funny to hear him stop mid-conversation, us all at, this dinner table at a restaurant, and say, hey, that breathing stuff that you and Frank are talking about each week, it's really helping me. And I was like, well, really? And he was like, yeah, I just want you to know, like, I've been implementing and becoming conscious of my breath and, trying to breathe throughout the day. And I've noticed myself not only feel better, but, the days were just nicer. They flowed better. Like, I didn't feel as, like, humdrum. And I thought that was very, very interesting and
It's
very
telling.
synchronistic.
Yeah, it's very telling,
Synchronistic, of just everything. I've been going through these last 7 weeks, Frank, etc., all of us combined. And it was just one of those, again, a synchronicity is like a little breadcrumb. It's like you're on the right path. That's how you should look at synchronicities. Like, oh shit, the things are flowing and they're just naturally happening. Yeah. And that's, again, my dad's not an avid listener to Perspective Shift, I'm sure. And it's just funny that he needed to hear that information these last 6-7 weeks, decided to tune into one of Frank and I's episode and begin to actually implement and practice it, because it was a physical way for him to be like, okay, I can physically do this. I don't have to get all woo-woo, like, I'm just going to try this.
Yeah, and then Randy's asking you, speaking from your dad's
from my
voice.
Dad. It was just all of that combined was very like, wow. And so, like, today when Frank and I are talking about Frank's session that he had last night, we're talking about Kayla's session that she had on Friday, we're talking about my session on Tuesday, and we're just sharing all this. We were like, hey, we need to dive into synchronicity today. And let's share a little bit about Randy Vettenheimer. Those listening, you guys check out his stuff. You will love it. You'll eat it up. It gives you a great opportunity to kind of listen, book a session with him, whatever you want to do. We would highly recommend him, type of thing. But we thought this was a great thing to tie together, because as we began to go back to these core 7 needs that Frank and I talk about, and specifically the breath, we began to notice these synchronicities unfold.
Yeah, and B and Mike's mentioned the 7, if anyone hasn't heard the other podcast, the 7 natural needs or core needs, or whatever you want to look at it. Even Abraham Maslow mentioned it. We're just going to say it a little differently. Mm-hmm. Obviously, 1 being breath, and these all go in order of timely fashion in survival mode. Mm-hmm. So obviously oxygen, which is breathing.
Number 1.
The second one is water. Mm-hmm. 3rd is sleep. You can't, I think 11 days, but you could look that up. I think after 11 days, you'll die. I don't know who's ever been up for 11 days. But anyway,
seriously.
Then food, then shelter, then relationship, and then creative expression. So all those 7 right there, once you meet all those needs, then, obviously, especially the first 6, when you get to those first 6, the creative expression becomes brilliant. And all these things we're talking about, just like a simple breath work every day. And the thing is, the more effort, or I should say, the more time and more focus you put into something, the greater the field. Randy was telling me about, yesterday, he was giving me an example of an older woman. She was like 76 years old. And when he got her on the phone, I was talking to her, he could sense her energy was very low. She had a multitude of kids. I think she was like married several times. He's like, yeah, I can see why. You get all this coming at you. And so he gave her an exercise, and he told her, okay, do this exercise from a minute, and over time we want to get to 11 minutes per day in the morning. All right. So when he went for her follow-up, like 7 to 10 days later, her field was off the charts. It was huge. And she was just sounding great. He's like, wow, you sound good. Like, how is everything going? It's like, yeah, I started doing that day 1 at 11 minutes. He goes, oh, I meant for you to go from a minute up. He goes, no. So here was this overachieving 76-year-old lady, if I'm getting her age right. Mm-hmm. And then, so he's telling me that story. So I'm like, so you're trying to tell me I need to be an overachiever now?
Yeah, exactly.
But the more you, and the reason, the indication of anyone doing something, if you've never done it before, yes, you do at least a minute and get to 11 in this particular aspect of exercise that he gave this particular woman, right? So same thing with breath work. If you just do it for a minute a day, you're going to feel good. I'm like, but me and Mike are telling you not just to do it for a minute a day. If you do it several times, if you do it 100 times in one day for a minute, that's 100 minutes in a day. Mm-hmm. I'm like, your life is going to extraordinarily change greatly, and it's not going to tax you. But if you just do it for a minute a day every day for 40 days, you're going to notice a difference.
Absolutely.
But think about after 40 days, if you were doing it for, 10 minutes a day. Like, this works because you're breathing anyway, but this is just focused breathing, which then helps amplify your electromagnetic field, torus field, your energy field. This is where vitality comes from. And when you're vital and vitality is strong, all of a sudden people attract to you. and then opportunities open up. You could see how things work even at a greater field. So Mike and I are not telling you this may work. We said this absolutely work to whatever degree in which energy you put into it. But if you don't do it, we can't guarantee it will work.
Let me share one that Randy shared with me too. So one thing Randy said to me on my call is, he was talking about, the importance of the energy field and how, like in your business, I know you're out there marketing and things like that. And I'm not saying don't market, but what I'm trying to say is your energy field.
You are your market.
Yeah. He's like, your energy field is what's bringing your clientele to you.
Yeah.
And he's like, I want you to know that. And so it's like, you're physically doing these things, you're sending out mailers, or you're, contacting people, you're marketing your business, but it's your field that people are interacting with, and they know if you can help them.
That's a great point, because a lot of times, like marketing to whatever degree you do is a permission slip. But where does it generate from? In other words, if I feel I do nothing, nothing's going to come to me. So that's a belief structure I have in the body, and the field knows it. The field knows every belief you have. It knows where you've been, what you've been through, just kind of like how he was picking through timelines where there was what he deemed to be like detrimental value or something that traumatically happened to us, right?
Yep.
So he's just lifting that up. The other things are not a big deal, that they won't break the energy field. So once we start going through that, your energy field knows your belief. So if your belief is, I have to do something to generate clientele, say, well, when you get to a good place where you feel good, taking out an ad, if you feel good about it, will do that. But remember, it was your energy field that enacted you taking that movement, not the ad. Why? Because a year from now, like for me, like in my business, everything was added, like ads out in papers and stuff like that. I'm like, well, today no one does that. Like it's all Instagram and stuff like that. But even then, I realized, well, I never got big into the Instagram stuff, but holding my energy at a certain level, clients would come in. I'm not opposed to that stuff. That's, now I got a marketing person that works for me, my partner. She's really into this stuff, and she gets excited about it. And it's exciting me, and then things are exploding due to the excitement and seeing it.
Exactly.
So these are all permission slips, but without a permission slip, you wouldn't be doing anything. So don't get too hung up on what you have to do, because if you ask someone, like, hey, like how do you get busy? If someone asks me that, how do I get more clients? I'm like, first of all, how do you feel? Like, what do you mean? Are you tired a lot? They're like, no. Just tell me how you get more clients. I'm like, okay, I'm creating a foundation here.
Yep.
Because if you're tired, you're not going to draw anyone in. It's not how much money you throw at it.
Correct.
I have no idea. Like I tell people, put very little money into it, but put your own energy into it, and then over time, the investment of money will be worth it. When they start amplifying how they feel, all of a sudden their businesses, their work, whatever it is, their workouts, they're losing weight, all stems from that energy field.
Yep.
How they go about it is just the story and how it works out. Yeah, you have to do something, But, I had a client that was saying, like, I'm trying to lose weight, but I just can't seem to get the energy to do cardio. I'm like, well, breathe first. I'm like, it's actually breath work is cardio. And what happens if you do a breath session for 5 to 10 minutes, sitting on your couch, unless it's a timely fashion based on your lifestyle, you're actually going to want to go to the gym. So before I go to the gym every day, I always do breath work. So when I get there, I don't necessarily have to warm up how I feel. Years ago, I did. I always knew when I go to the gym, within 10 to 15 minutes, something's going to kick and it's going to boom. And I'm like, okay, I'm here, right? And that's in the early beginning of my workouts. Now, that happens before I get to the gym. Where before, I'm like, fuck. All right, but I know it's going to hit. Whether it's going to be in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it doesn't matter. I know it's going to hit. Now, it's like, oh, it already hit because I did it at home. So this is what it is. We're teaching you how to be more efficient in the energy stream of life, because I don't care how much money you have. If you don't have vitality, that money will disappear and you won't even enjoy it. You won't. But once I don't care how much, if you have no money, if you raise your vitality, all of a sudden money's going to start to appear. What's going to appear is the ability for you to see how to take action, because action's needed, because Randy talks about this, zeros and ones. Zero is actually all the secret talked about, by the way. They talked about, close your eyes and do the vision board. But what they left out is the ones. So if you really truly believe you are wealthy, you then would act like a wealthy person, even if your bank account doesn't see it.
Yep.
And they'd be like, what do you mean? Like, well, millionaires don't go out shopping every day. They don't. Their children do.
Yeah, right.
They just go out and they love to see things grow. So what they like, okay, I made $1 million last year. Let's see if I can make $2 million this year. It's the growth. It's not greed. It's not, I need this to take over. So like, greed is, I need this to overcome something that I'm missing in my life. Where naturally human beings like to see something grow. Now, in discernment, you have to realize, are you doing this to make yourself feel better, or are you doing it because you like the actual field of growth? That's what it is. So Mike and I and Kayla, we didn't really seemingly have any ailments to go see, to talk to Randy, but we like to see stuff grow, and Randy showed us how we can continue this. And as time goes on, other things are going to come in and keep growing and growing and growing.
Exactly. So. And one thing too, anybody who's interested in Randy, you don't need an ailment. You can reach out, gauge where your energy level's at, contact him. But one thing I wanted to say, just like about this overview, is the experience with him was fascinating because it was very eye-opening how it connected very much to the foundational stuff that Frank and I have been going over the last 6 to 8 weeks. And with that being said, I was able to tie in a lot of the stuff he was talking about with energy back to the breath, because I started to see that our energy level, our energy field, like through my conversation with Randy, I noticed the value and the importance, and it's really our energy that's affecting how we experience, the world we're interacting with. Really low energy, correlates with, non-preferential experiences, where when you have that deep knowing, that feeling, very high energy type of state, things feel like they're flowing, and they're working out and things like that. So one cool little story that I'll share too, before we do have a clip we want to share with you guys from Randy. But one thing that he said to me was interesting, because he was like, I had one of my clients call. She's an actor, out in Los Angeles, very big name actor. She has not recently been in movies. She's missed out on a few that she wanted, but she called me and she's like, hey Randy, what the hell's going on here? I haven't done a movie in a while, I've got, such a presence in this, industry, all this stuff. And he says to the actor, he's like, well, it doesn't surprise me. You've got a 4-foot energy field right now. Like he's like, like nothing's going on. Like you have no movement there. Like I can feel it. And he's like, hold on, let's get in and let's work on it. Well, he goes through a session just like he did with Frank, Kayla, and I, and works on her energy field, gets everything in line, all that. He's like, Mike, I heard from her, about 10, 12 days later, she calls me and she's like, Randy, you won't believe it. I've been offered, 2 movies just in the last 2 weeks. And he's like, this has nothing to do with me. He's like, this is your energy field. Yeah. You're now visible to these people where you weren't before. Yeah. You're now interacting in a field where they're attracted to you. They're drawn to you, and it's very cool hearing that, from this 75-year-old man who has, been, on the path, doing the work for years, and just seeing the correlation of, energy with what we would call success or, goals and things like that. And to say that there's not a direct correlation would just be foolish. Yeah, and the one thing I did, and you probably experienced it too, I'm sure Kayla did as well, when I got on the phone with him, with like in a minute, it was like I was talking to an old friend. Yep. Like it wasn't like your wise frickin' friend. Yeah, like he gets on. I got on the phone with him. It was like, excuse me, I got to do something for a minute. He's like, I've had a day. He wasn't like trying to prop up, like selling me a car or something at all. Quite the opposite, actually. And it was just a very real, warm, pleasant experience I had with this gentleman. Yeah. And it's like, he's like a dear friend now. Very natural. In the essence of how it feels. And it's amazing. So when you run into people like that. And also too, there's something Mike said too. It's like,
when your energy is low, when you're like, say, at a 4, and he's measuring, 4 is 4 feet, right? So we're supposed to be around.
He told me a minimum of a 9-foot energy field.
Yeah,
like minimum, he's like, we should all be at 9 feet.
Yeah.
He's like, and I'm sure he took you to 30, 40 plus
yeah,
feet.
so 9 foot would be in the realm of positive. So if you understood power versus force, David Hawkins gave the scale from like 0 or 1, if you want to put 0 in there, to 700. 700 being like the Jesus, the Buddhas, and what have you. All
Pure
right.
enlightenment.
So 200 is actually the first number within the field of positive. Everything from 1 to 199, is negative. All right. But so, and what is 0 or 1 to 199 is survival. Now we just stepped out of survival, and then as you go up the scale, like go up to 499, that's high intellect. 500 is love. So we actually step out of the intellect, trying to explain everything. You step into this, and so on and so forth. But so
beyond
when
love
you're
is
at
joy,
when you're
which
at 900, you're in the 200 range of energy, and life is working out really well. But I say word but. There's something in us that always wants to expand to other levels. So I always say, make sure 9 is your baseline. Don't go below that. And if it does, start doing breath work. And it works because, when Mike and I both got onto him, our fields were higher than that base, but then we want to expand onto it. So, and I see the correlation with the breath work and the work we're doing. Am I always there? No. Because I don't know, I can tell when I'm not there, but the excuse of why I'm not there no longer resonates in my brain because I'm not used to that anymore.
It's just that. It's a story.
I'm not like, well, the reason I'm tired today is because I'm like, shut the fuck up.
Look, yeah.
Yeah, I understand I'm tired because I got 4 hours of sleep, but that's no longer an excuse. So, do this work and all of a sudden it goes away and nothing affects my day. That's it. So, when that understanding, so if a kid went to, like, talk about preferential, if a kid was tired and had like a 4-foot field around them and they were at this preferential place called Disneyland, they would still have a miserable time. So what it is when you raise your field, every place you're at is great. There is no boredom. There is no nothing. So the reason I brought that up is I don't want to attach to what we deem to be good and what deem to be bad. It's a field we're in. And when people are in a great field, everything looks promising. Yeah. When you're in a bad field, you could be sitting there with $1 million and then you're like, yeah, but everyone around me has 2 million. And then you find negativity in that, or I can lose it, And so that's, we don't want to get hooked up onto the one field of objectivity. We want to keep moving and letting go of that. And we keep cycling back to zeros, to 1, 0, to 1, 0, to 1. 0 being the spirit, the energy field, making sure it's growing. And then how do we enact it? How do we really build it in? By acting on it. And then we go into 1. So if an idea, I'm like, okay, I want to start a business. Well, then a thought will come in. Act on that thought. If you don't, it disappears. The energy it's like keeping a battery out in the heat. All of a sudden, after a while, the battery didn't generate any operations, but yet it's dead because you didn't use it properly. So use your imagination, but then enact it. And you'll only enact it if you believe it's going to happen. To what degree? See what happens. I guarantee it. Things are going to be moving in the right direction. I guarantee it. So the 40 days are just your focus. And after 40 days, why we don't go more? Because you'll be doing it for the rest of your life without even thinking about it. Because if you feel good, why would you stop? You wouldn't. So now in 40 days, you're a completely different body. And 40 days seems to have this magical number, right? What did Jesus do?
40 days and 40 nights.
40 years in the desert took Moses to get the Israelites into the what they call the Promised Land. And one way of looking at that, 40 years is 2 generations out. So it took 2 generations for them to not know they were slaves in order to find the Promised Land. The Promised Land wasn't a parcel of land, so to speak. It was a state of mind. Yep. So by the 2nd generation, they didn't know what slavery was because they weren't in that. But they were lost in the desert, so to speak. And the desert, to me, is a vast opportunity of anything, but doesn't seem to have anything growing at the moment. But it's open. It's like a blank canvas. Let's do something with it. So
well said.
Yeah, there's something tied into that. I'm not a historian, all this stuff, but these numbers keep popping up. There's some correlation into it. But just try it. Just do it. Not try it. Do it. Mm-hmm. And see what happens. And, as we continue doing this, Mike and I will come back and tell you the more synchronistic things that happen after meeting Randy, and then going to Bashar, and all these other things. It doesn't mean you have to do any of this stuff, but just breathe.
Exactly.
You have to breathe, though.
And it's exciting, too. We've both Frank and I, we have follow-up calls scheduled with Randy, so I'm excited for that. Randy said he's going to be visiting Arizona in the next couple of months here, so I'll try to get him on and see if we can get him in here, do an episode with him on perspective shift, because that would be great for the audience.
Well, right now, energetically, he's here.
Absolutely. He really is, and that's the cool part is, he can tap in anywhere. Like we all share this field. As much as we have never been taught about it, we all kind of can feel it and know it. We can tell when the eyes are in the back of our head. There's just certain things you can pick up when somebody's full of shit. These are all natural things within the field that we have the ability to access. Sure, some others like Randy have a gift, they're talented when it comes to it. Does that mean that Frank and I couldn't train and do the exact same thing? Who says that's not possible? Of course, that's the thing about this field, and it's exciting and it's cool, but I think seeing the synchronicities that have unfolded just in the last 6 to 8 weeks, if we've been talking about, bringing this back to the basics, bringing this back to, the breath, it's undeniable the way things have begun to flow. And I'm very excited for this weekend because Frank and I are both going to Bashar. Kayla will be there as well.
In Sedona.
Sedona, here we come. Frank and I leave. Yep. I'm leaving early. I'm going up on Thursday. I'm going to be there a couple days. I'm trying to do a little vacation out of it too. And then Saturday and Sunday, we'll be watching Bashar in theater, right there.
Yeah,
connected and all in. And I'm very excited. We've got a meditation with Bashar on Saturday night as well.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's introduce you to Randy himself through a video, and one day we will have him on the podcast. But for now, we'll introduce him to this little clip.
Let's do it.
Today's question and topic is the one of being the observer, and what that means and how we get there. So today I'm going to try to weave several different topics together to show you how this works and what you can expect when you try these techniques. Why would anybody want to be an observer? The observer status is one that allows you to examine yourself, your environment, and your own consciousness. And by the self-examination, we can elevate our own consciousness and that of our activities while we're on this planet. Sometimes people ask me where I first came across the observer set or the observer status. I think when I was about 14 or 15 years old, I picked up a book by Colin Wilson, and that book was called The Outsider. And it's very interesting because at one point in the book, very shortly into it, Colin Wilson talks about being at the dinner table with his family. And in an instant, he was outside the dining room and he was looking inside and observing what was going on. This bilocation, this separation of consciousness is required before we can really understand ourselves or understand others. So most people never really get to that point. Everything is of a whole, meaning their consciousness, their ego, their whole awareness is involved strictly with themselves. And to be able to separate is also to be able to analyze or to be able to determine what is valuable and what is not. And so out of the ideal of the observer status comes discernment. So when people talk about the observer status, really discernment is what we're after. This is a skill set, the ability to discern the truth, not just about what is outside of us and what we're seeing or hearing or feeling, but also what goes on inside of us. So the book, Colin Wilson, was my first encounter with the idea of being an outsider, being an observer, because I recognized in reading the book that this is what I was experiencing at a very early age. My next encounter with being the observer was just an environmental effect of being raised in Native American communities and around Native American people. The observer status in a Native American community is something that we learn from birth, literally. It is the ability to interact with our environment and to be able to learn from it. And not only that, to read it at a very deep level. So the observer status has levels of discernment. It's like, how deep do you want to go? In Native American culture, to be able to talk to plants, to be able to talk to animals, to be able to read the clouds, to be able to use the trees and the earth itself as a source of information is a normal thing. But in other societies, this may not be true. So there's a natural component to it if we're left to our own devices, and those are being able to explore our environment and explore ourselves. The third encounter with being an observer occurs in yoga, in meditation, martial arts, where it is a requirement to advance oneself. All of these produce the effect of being more knowing of the self, and in being more knowing of the self, we become more knowing of our environment. It also works the other way around. We become more knowing of our environment and what goes on around us. We become more aware of what goes on within us. The fourth encounter of the observer status occurs with the teachings of Dr. David Hawkins. In studying with David, he brought up the subject of being the observer. This same concept, like I referred to earlier, is brought up in my martial arts training and in the yoga practices I've done over the last 30 or 40 years. Each of these expands one's awareness to include a higher skill set of being an observer. What is an observer? Is somebody who takes the time to cut the filters, cut the judgments, cut all the kind of racket that goes on in the brain when we observe and interact with our universe. This is normal. It's normal to provide all the chatter, to provide all the information that comes from our filters of liking or not liking, or loving or not loving. So ultimately, to be the observer is to be neutral. This is the required specific placement of the consciousness that would allow one to become the observer. Because as soon as you go out of observer status, you're immediately into judgment and contemplation or active mind about what's going on and what it means to you and what it relates to. So all these things are important in life, but the observer status, the ability to be neutral, gives us the greatest opportunity to educate ourselves about what it means to be human, what it means to be alive, and what it means to be you. Being neutral means to suspend all of the information processing abilities of the mind. It's not something that people usually come to naturally. It generally requires some sort of techniques or some sort of training or some sort of interactions where somebody is actually giving you the information. And this is one of the things I've always taught in my classes, is that ultimately we're going to get to a point where we're in a non-judgmental status. We're in an observer status. And in an observer status, we really don't expend energy. So the energy that's conserved becomes available to us rather than expended in high emotional states or negative emotional states or negative mental states, such as anxiety or depression. I think the easiest way to acquire observer status or neutrality is to not be attached to the outcome. It's a very popular term now, flow, to be in the flow of things. To be in the flow of things is to offer no resistance. And this is the same way when we look at our thoughts. In yoga and meditation, we offer no resistance to them. So by not resisting the thought and allowing it to come and go, we actually get into that neutral state. We can see something and offer no judgment, no opinion, no connection, and no engagement. So being in the observer status, or being in the neutral state, is reflective of not engaging our mental processes. And these can take the form of what I refer to in my work as set theory. So we have information sets, we have preference sets, we have relational sets. Each one of these represents a set of filters that cause us to process information through a variety of filters, levels, and each one of them takes information, takes our process through a period of evaluation and determines if they're positive or negative. If we ask what that does to the body, it's kind of like we hold our body and hold our energy in restraint, waiting for an opportunity to let that energy go. And sometimes we hold it too tight and it's reflected in tension in the body. And sometimes we hold it too tight in the mind and it's reflected in the conscription and the restriction of our mental processes. So one of the things that happens is we can take a song like Stop in the Name of Love by the Supremes and take a look at that and say, what has that got to do with all this? When you stop the flow of energy from the body and through the heart chakra, you have stopped the ability to interact. You've stopped the ability to be discerning, and you have passed judgment on what you're seeing or what's going on around you. So one of the effects of being in an observer status is that you no longer restrict the flow of energy through the body. This relates to Qigong medical practices, which I also practice. It relates to the flow of energy as defined in yoga and martial arts. It relates as the flow of life itself. So even a song like Stop in the Name of Love, Before You Break My Heart, think it over. And there becomes the problem. Everything we see, everything we feel, everything that goes on around us, we think about, when thinking oftentimes is not required. So that's the message of that song. If we go to number six is like in Native American mythology, Native American tradition, Native American culture, the concept is called seeing and hearing. And we practice seeing, we practice what we see. We look at what we see and say things like, why am I seeing that? How does what I'm seeing relate to everything around it? And how does everything relate back to me? Now this is an intellectual process that eventually you abandon because that information becomes instantly a part of your awareness. It's a very high state of consciousness. It's something not understood unless you've experienced it yourself. And this can be practiced by being out in the environment, in the woods, in the jungle, or even in the concrete jungle of the cities. It can be practiced anywhere. So you look at what you're seeing, and that's it. You look at it. You have no judgment of it. You're neutral. Now we go to what do you say? This is another thing. Your words have meaning. Your words have vibration. Your words have energy. So in Native American culture, speaking is something that's a little different than the older cultures I grew up in and I experience today, because words were not given very freely. They were contemplated before they were released into the universe. So we would say, look at me, look at me, look at me. This is me seeing myself, being involved in the thinking of it, the processing of it, and ultimately the judgment of it, which takes away my energy and moves me away from myself. The same thing occurs when we say, look at what I say, or listen to what I say rather. Listen to me, listen to what I just said. And you would take time to stop and think about what you just said and think about the truth of it and how it affects you and how it affects the people you're talking to. This is part of Native American oral traditions. You would not speak until you had already done all this. The words would not come out of you until you had thought about the weight of them and what they were doing to yourself, let alone what they were doing to the person you were talking to. These are observer status elements that can be practiced by anyone.
Yeah, there was a lot to unpack there, but
Great clip.
Great clip. And notice, like, bringing it to simple, like, and that's something like just what he said right there. It's something to really contemplate. But to make it simple, if you come back and start focusing on your breath, you're observing yourself breathing. And when that happens, all these other things he's talking about, like the discernment of what to say and when to speak and what to say, becomes easier. We know this. We're low energy. Certain things can trigger us and we get aggravated, and then we say stuff that we don't want to say, and then we end up apologizing later on. And I always get this. People are like, oh, that person's not really sorry. I'm like, yeah, they are. I'm like, but because we have, what do you call it? Personality. We don't call it disorder, but we have multiple personality order. In other words, when I'm in a field of 4 feet opposed to a field of 20 feet, how I see a situation is completely different. So because I got stuck in the 4 foot and I opened my damn mouth and I said something, when I fall into the 20 feet, say, it looks differently. Where the problem is why aren't we able to control the field of energy around us? And so through breath work and the explanation, what Randy's talking about here starts to actually germinate and make a lot more sense. You start to have the discernment of it. So why am I getting angry? Because my field of energy is low, period. And then this thing triggered it. Why is my field of energy low? Because you're not giving attention to it. What he says, you're not observing it. If you're observing anything, say you're a guard guarding something, you just observe the camera and someone's going there and they're not supposed to be there, you get up and nothing ever happens. But if you're not observing it, and then you wonder how they broke in and stole the money, like, oh, what were you doing? Oh, yeah, I was eating a sandwich and a piece of it fell on the floor and I ducked down. The next thing, the robbers went in there and shit, because they were in a lack of observing situation. But if I'm observing how I'm feeling, I'm like, I feel great. Keep going. But if I'm observing, I don't feel good. Well, what can I do? Start observing your breath. Notice, the augmentation of my breath. My breath is either racing or shallow. Well, and then he talked in the beginning about the balancing or neutrality, which is balance. So the purpose of like certain types, if I have anxiety, there's a certain type of breath I want to do to get my heart rate down, right? If I'm tired, I want to get my heart rate up. But once I get it up, now I want to go to what we call neutral breathing. Breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4, out 1, 2, 3, 4. That's neutrality. It's equal on both ends. Now I'm in the 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Beautiful. But when I go 0, 0, 0, 0, I've been thinking too much and I don't have to get back to 1. Well, there's a breath work for that.
Yep.
And then once I get to the state where I'm feeling good, then pay homage to observe your neutrality breathing. When you're neutral, doesn't matter who the president of the United States is.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter what they said to you because you don't. And then, okay, why am I feeling this way? Because you just stepped out of neutral. So now, when I've noticed I get upset, I'm observing it, and now I know where to go to get to that neutral state where it no longer bothers me. There's a lot to unpack here with Randy. I think we're going to talk about this on the next podcast because there's so much to unpack here, what he said. But that was just a little brief. And it was the first time I heard that video.
Yeah, this was a great clip.
Yeah, so it was a great clip.
Kind of recapping just the stuff we talked about today, too. One thing I want to mention on this clip that just came to me when I was watching it, one of the reasons I was so drawn to Randy Vettenheimer back in, I want to say it was 4 years ago when I first watched Quantum Effect. But one of the things, and it wasn't on Quantum Effect, I actually started watching some interviews with him after, but one of the things he said that really like stuck with me and like hit me over the head, if you will, is he's like, you don't need to be thinking. Like you don't need to be thinking. Everyone's always thinking, and we're taught that it's normal to live in this world of constant thinking, and you're not going to fall apart if you stop thinking. And that,
quite the opposite.
Yeah,
we fall apart because we think.
It's crazy, and it's like weird because he's absolutely right. And I remember really practicing that like a couple years ago. I'm like, wow, like this is so helpful because we are always narrating. We're always talking. If we don't like something, I gotta flip this script on this. I've got to now picture it where it's a positive thing. Well, and that's just like creating more thinking. It's just actually a complete and total letting go, and it's like it just passes like a cloud, and it's there. You don't need to be in a constant state of narration and thinking, and the world's not going to fall apart.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up because that was a point I just happened with a client of mine the other day, and what you said was brilliant there because all of a sudden if a thought created a negative energy in my head, trying to counterbalance with a positive thought doesn't work, because now you're already in a negative state. Like, again, the kid that's tired and cranky at Disneyland doesn't I'm tired and cranky. Let's take the kid to Disneyland. It'll help him. I'm like, no, there might be a momentary distraction, but they're still tired and cranky. So you have to get them out of the state. That's why the parents we're not leaving, we're not going there unless you change your attitude. And even though you can't, scold that into a child, there's some real value in the understanding of not the execution was poor by yelling at the kid, but nonetheless, once we get into that state, through breathing is the quickest way because oxygen is always with you. Then you could start to see how everything starts to work. And that's the brilliance of it. So we always have oxygen with us. We don't always necessarily have other things like meditation or what have you, although when you actually are breathing, it is a state of meditation, some other modalities. But you never want to go to the thing that created it. So the mind, like I said earlier, the mind doesn't know what love is. But I can say, well, I really love this person, and it upsets me. And so I try to mentally, okay, let me tell a story. Maybe they're having a hard day. And well, I'm having a hard day too. And all of a sudden the fucking story grows. And when the story grows in your head, your field shrinks. Why? Because the story in your head takes so much energy. It's sucking in all the glucose into your brain and the activity. All of a sudden, it's like when you touch your computer or your phone and it's red hot, I'm like, you better start closing some applications down. All of a sudden, when you get it down to that neutral field, all of a sudden, nothing seems to bother you. It's like, wow. So go to the body, or the breath, I should say, which is tied into the body. And then all of a sudden, you stop thinking, but what you do is a thought comes in, act on the thought as best you can. And when you act on the thought as best you can, this is interesting. Let's go here, let's go there. And next thing you know, 7 weeks later, like Mike and I, all these synchronistic things happen because we weren't thinking about what we're doing, we're just doing it. Mike didn't think about, okay, what's the value in calling Randy? And then Mike told me his experience. Mike, give me his number. Yeah. And I called him. I'm like, let me think about it. Yeah. I had a friend that was that way. I mentioned, hey, let's do this. Well, let's talk about it, on Monday. I'm like, we talked about it now. Let's just do it. Well, we have to talk about it more. I'm like, I just talked about it. I'm like, what else did I talk about?
What else is there to talk about?
It's like, let's have a debate on this thing. Let's stop having debates, people, and just enact it. And if you enact something, it doesn't work. The beautiful thing about the universe, we have the capacity as individuals and humans or whatever to know that something's not working. Well, then do the opposite. But don't think about it. Why isn't this working? Because it's not. And
this is discernment where it comes into play.
Yes, that's what he talked about, discernment. But so
it's brilliant.
Mike and I are going to keep diving deeper into these concepts, starting with the breath, oxygen, and see the synchronicity. And we encourage everyone to do this. I guarantee your life will change by the next time you listen to us. If you listen to the next podcast, if you take this on every day, just wake up, do breathing through it intermittently throughout the day. But at least if you just do it once in the morning, watch things to change. Yeah. Watch things change. They're going to. You're going to feel good while you're doing it. You are. Things are going to change.
Things will change. Yeah. And that's what's so exciting is you're starting a new habit, a new pattern that's rewriting old bad habits, old patterns, etc. And so getting in there, calming yourself, bringing yourself into your most natural state, just be ready for the different synchronicities that are going to come your way. And it's exciting. And remain neutral. Remain the observer, like Randy's talking about, because the more you can remain neutral, to something, it turns out even greater than you could have ever thought of it.
Yeah. And we encourage you guys to have any experiences over the next several weeks, whatever, with synchronicities. You can DM us or
send us
email to perspectiveshift2020@gmail.com.
Yep.
Me and Mike are pretty good with that. I think Kayla does the DM stuff.
Yep.
I didn't even know what DM was a year ago.
DM. Send us whatever. Email comes to Frank and my
when people
phones.
do stuff like DM to me, I pretend to know it. I'm like, okay, I'll read your DM. I'm like, I don't even know what the hell a DM is. I have to look it up and shit.
Figure out
direct message.
What
I got it.
Is this for?
Like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, no, totally.
So, but I know what an email is.
and we get them directly to our phones.
And I know how to find it.
Yeah. But thank you guys for tuning in this week. It was awesome. If you have a chance, please go check out Randy Vettenheimer. He's got a YouTube channel called The Energy Doctor. You can follow him on Instagram at The Energy Doctor. Doctor spelled with a K, Doktor, I believe it is. And you can also just find him online. You know, he has a series on Gaia if you like Gaia, but definitely listen to Randy's stuff. He is worthwhile to listen.
Yeah. So everyone hope you enjoy what you heard today, and much love and peace out.
We'll see you guys soon.
All right.